Welcome to On Strike, a production of Worker Strike Back. I'm Kshama Sawant.
And I'm Emily McArthur. As the anti-war protest movement continues to organize on campuses, even with many students now going home for the summer, Biden's backing of the genocidal war on Gaza continues to contribute to his tanking in the polls, as does the cost of living crisis that has been burying working people in the U.S. Biden has some of the lowest poll numbers at this point in the election cycle of any U.S. president in modern U.S. history, with approval ratings in the 30s just 2 months before the Democratic National Convention. This is not out of love for Trump, of course, who himself has an abysmal approval rating, and the two are neck and neck in many battleground states. The question for young people, working class people, and the anti-war movement is, what should we do in this election, given the terrible options on offer from the two capitalist parties, and how do we connect this to building the strongest possible movement to end the war on Gaza? Today, we're excited to have Nick Cruse with us here. Nick is a citizen journalist, writer, activist, and the main co-founder of the Revolutionary Blackout Network, also called RBN. RBN has covered the war on Gaza since it began, and Nick came to speak at the launch of Worker Strike Back last March in Seattle. Welcome to On Strike, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys, and I appreciate you guys for inviting me. It was great meeting you guys when I was in Seattle as well. So it's great to be on the show finally.
Great to have you with us, Nick. It's now 10 months since the bloody onslaught began on the people of Gaza. As we have said on this show many times, this genocidal war on Gaza would not be possible without the backing of Biden and the US ruling class for the Israeli state. While Trump is no alternative and would also back Netanyahu to the hilt, we think that working people and the left cannot support Biden. Do you agree with us, Nick?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What I find hilarious are the people who are trying to sheepdog the people who are anti-genocide and refuse to vote for a pro-genocide party by saying that here are steps that Biden can take in order. No, there's no steps. We witnessed probably one of the most barbaric administrations in modern history. Like there was just a massacre at the fake pier that Biden and his administration built, which many very observant people acknowledged at the time when they was building this failed pier in order to import humanitarian aid, that was always a guise for a future military operation. And now it just came out that the United States military, with Biden at the head, just committed one of the most grotesque war crimes, disguising soldiers as aid workers and slaughtering over 100 Palestinians. And that's just one of many of Biden's crimes. You had him actively lie about UNRWA and said that he saw evidence of UNRWA being terrorist, even though it was later revealed there was no evidence. You had Israel that tortured UNRWA staff and got tortured, obtained confessions. He used that to cut aid to UNRWA. He is an active participant in the genocide, providing diplomatic cover, providing all the weapons that Israel has used. And even though it may be good to see ICC charges against Netanyahu, it's a crime against humanity that Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden are not getting arrest warrants as well, because they are just as complicit. There's no tension. All this fake tension between Netanyahu and Biden is made up. Biden is doing everything he can to help facilitate the genocide. And because of the most recent tragedy that just happened, we see why Aaron Bushnell self-immolized. And we see why he made the decision that he did, because Biden ordered the Air Force and the U.S. military to help Israel with targeting and with operation procedures like we see at the airport. So with that said, absolutely no way, shape, or form should anyone support Joe Biden, or you're giving AOK for genocide. There's nothing lower than that.
And to follow up with the points you were making about the anger against the war, we also know that there is massive anger among millions of American working class people, poor people, about the unprecedented cost of living that they are facing. And that, in combination with the war, has created a situation where both Trump and Biden are historically the most unpopular candidates that have been on offer, as Emily was saying earlier. Can you talk about how historic numbers of young people, Black people, people who are Muslim and who are Arab Americans, who are especially who are angry at the war on Gaza, how many of these people are angry at Biden? But also beyond that, what is it that you think that young people are looking for?
I don't know if you guys saw the Biden administration was just complaining in the headline I saw where they was complaining that a lot of people don't believe them when they said the economy is good. They said, oh, they're throwing their hands up in the air because despite all their messaging campaigns, despite everything they're saying, people won't believe them when they say the economy is doing. So despite the fact that people are struggling to pay their bills, despite the fact that many people don't have health care like myself, the Biden administration and the establishment wants you to believe that this economy is doing great. You're not going to be able to gaslight people. In our generation, unlike generations before, there was never any illusion of the American dream. We witnessed our parents struggling growing up, and then we grew up in a situation. For example, the year before I graduated high school, you had the Wall Street market crash. In my lifetime, there was three complete crashes of our economy. You had the dot-com bubble, you had the 2008 financial crash, and you had the 2020 economic crisis. So in our lifetime alone, Kshama, we've seen the economy crash three times before I turned 30, and people wondering why we are not buying into this system, which is why I ultimately think it's absurd for anyone to support someone or any party that led us to the situation that we're in right now. And there's all these nonsense neoliberal economic programs that Democratic Party touts, but no one, especially in our generation, believes in it, which is why you see Congress, they have an approval rating around 13, 17%. No one believes in our government, and no one believes that our government is actually doing anything to improve our lives, which is why we are seeing cop cities pop up all over the country. They're not trying to increase the quality of people's lives. They're increasing and building a police state in order to quell a dissent that they are anticipating. So as people become more poor, more desperate, more aware of the actions that our government are taking, they'd be more likely to hit the streets. Which is why you see the rise of cop cities, which is why you see the militarized response to even the anti-genocide protests, because the ruling class has to send a message that they can't allow any a dissent that actually threaten power to fly.
Yeah, I think the points you were making, Nick, about this increase in repression that we're seeing is just an absolute signatory sort of aspect of capitalism, right? That the state uses its authority to repress people as they sort of reject the status quo. And in terms of kind of building an alternative to that, I think it does start, sort of contending for political power. And On Strike has been calling, this year in 2024 for a vote for Jill Stein in this election as part of an effort to begin building an independent party for the working class. We think it's very important that Stein has not only oriented her campaign toward the protest movement and stood up against the war, but she's even been willing to face arrest and actually got arrested alongside dozens of student protesters for doing so. Are you supporting Stein's campaign? And if so, why?
Yeah, I voted for Stein in the Green Party the last three elections. Ever since 2016, I'm honored to have spoken at an event at KU with Jill Stein. And I want to emphasize that our main focus should not be on electoral politics, but if you're going to engage in the electoral system, you might as well vote for the only anti genocide candidate. And me personally, I live in Missouri, so I vote because we have ballot initiatives. And we actually have a lot of good ones in Missouri. I had to look and see which ones was actually approved. And I can vote pretty easily. So there's a library that right where I live at, so it don't take me that long to vote. So that's why I vote in elections, because it's very easy. If you don't have time, I always stress people, like, I don't think people should be taking our work to do all this stuff. But if you're able to vote and you want to flex your power that way, I think you might as well support the only anti-genocide candidate. But with that said, Jill Stein and the people on her campaign, they're doing their part in terms of resisting the establishment and the empire. And as I advocate, like any Marxist and socialist should, that we should be building our own socialist Marxist parties outside of the capitalist structure, we can support Jill Stein while still doing our part, not being just satisfied with just supporting Jill Stein. and that's why we started multiple RBN chapters. I push mutual aid hard, and I try to engage in mutual aid as much as I can. So even though Dr. Jill Stein is doing her part, that's far from everything we need. We need everyone to do their part. And that means if you can donate time to an organization, if you are a class trader and you don't have time to hit the streets, that means you donate your funds, donate your energy. If you make sweaters, maybe you donate sweaters to the movement. Maybe you're good at making pies. Then you cook pies for the movement. So what we're trying to do at RBN, and I think you guys do a great job at this as well at Worker Strike Back. I think Kshama has done a good job at this as well. I want to activate people. And I don't think advocating for third parties can deactivate people, but for a very long time, people, and I am guilty of this in my early age, you just engage in the voting process, you engage in electoral politics. In this situation, people may just vote for Joe Stein. They think that's enough. What we stress is, yeah, I think it's important to support third parties, anyone you can vote for, but we all got to lift our part. We all got to do our part in order to strive for revolution. I'm a Marxist. I believe that we always should be striving for revolution, whether the revolution comes in 5 years, whether it comes in 20 years or 50 years, doesn't matter. We build that revolution and support Joe Stein, but at the same time, don't forget what you should be doing for your community. How can you improve the quality of life for your community right now, your family right now? So that's my main focus. So to answer your question, I think having an anti-genocide candidate like Joe Stein is great right now, especially someone who have ballot access, because we are seeing a historic amount of people rejected duopoly, and I think this is what a lot of people forget. It's not about electoral politics leading to a revolution, but as revolutionaries, we take any opportunity to get people used to engaging in revolutionary actions. And what I mean by that, for the step, if someone was voting Democrat or Republican for 15 years, 20 years, imagine someone who's been doing this for a very long time, just getting them engaged in the act of voting third party, of rejecting the system, that's very important for our revolution. That spurs up revolutionary energy. You get people used to dissenting. And then when people are used to dissenting, then you get them to organizing. It's a process, and we all got to play our role in the process, not just with our votes, but with our actions as well.
Yeah, thanks for laying that out. I mean, definitely agree that we want people to be doing a lot more than just showing up on November 4th, right? It's going to take a lot more than that to fight back against the system that, wages a war, a genocidal war.
And trust me, I know that you guys know that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. I know that you guys know that, but it must always be said. You know what I mean? For
Yeah, I
anyone
totally
listening,
agree.
like it's yeah, you vote, but there's something else to do as well. I know you guys know that, but it's something that we have to hammer that you do what you gotta do. But sorry, I'll let you continue.
No, you're fine. I think it's a good thing to be passionate about, right? And I think you pointed to some of these things in your last sort of answer, but I think beyond just showing up on November 4th, there is some work to be done in terms of drawing out that it is worth turning out to vote for Jill Stein and the fight to build a new party. I think we hear a lot, well, she's not going to win this year anyways. And so that can kind of lead to this defeatist attitude of that it's not even worth turning out to vote. And yeah, I wonder if you could speak to like what you would say to people in your community or who watch RBN and obviously the viewers of On Strike of, why is it worth turning out to vote, and what roles can they play specifically to build this, anti-genocide campaign as you've spoken to? I think you spoke to some of them, but just concretely specific to Stein's campaign.
I will never tell anyone to vote against their conscience. If for whatever reason they can't vote for Jill Stein with their conscience, I will never push them to do that. But considering Jill Stein's policy and what she represents, there's not many people in that position. So the main argument that people make is, oh, what's the point? Talking about what you mentioned here, she's not going to win anyway. I mean, I voted for Jill. It was 9 years ago, the first time I voted for her. There was an argument that never made sense to me. Like even when I was more liberal minded, even before I got into theory, because what is the alternative? What is the alternative than supporting the candidate that has your best interests at heart? So even though she may not win the election, you have nothing else to do other than to lay the groundwork for your politics to thrive. What the establishment has tricked people to do, and many people, they just vote for the winner. What is, oh, it's this person's not going to win, so I might as well vote for the person who's going to win. What's the logic of doing that? What's the logic of voting for someone you think they're going to win and they don't represent your interests? So what you should be doing at all time, you should be building up a faction, building up an army, building up a movement needed to carry on your politics, even if it doesn't take your lifetime. Because what a lot of people do, they waste their vote, they don't organize, they don't build political power, and then they at age 70, they wonder what they've been doing with their entire life. When I'm at age 70, I know I create a society better for my nieces, cousins, and my sons and my granddaughters and all that. So that's what the long term path is. And that's why you ultimately should support a third party that you support morally. I will never ask someone to vote for someone they don't morally support. But let's take Joe Stein for instance, because I support the eco-socialist agenda. I support the anti-imperialist messages of the Green Party. I think they have a ton of great things for the Black community. When you look at their position on policing, they have a fantastic reparations program. So me personally, I think it's a movement worth supporting. Now, you can hit 5%. If you hit 5% in third party, you get federal funding. If you get 15%, you get on the debate stage. This is what people leave out. So if you get 5% federal funding for your party, that's you can't inherently waste your vote. Now, let's not talk about getting power through the bourgeoisie capitalist system because we know they will change the rules. But that's the point. So I mentioned earlier how we would get 15%, we hit the debate stage. We know there's no way that we'll let Jill Stein hit the debate stage, even if she hit 20%, right? But if you have 15% of the population who supports you, you're already there. There have been studies, and when you study revolution, it's shown that you only really need 5% of the population to be passionate about it. Then you have other 5% of the population who will be passionately fight you against you. But if you have a movement that has got 15%, you mobilizing people, a lot of people on the fence would then join your side. There are a lot of people who wouldn't support a third party otherwise, who see you gaining movement, who will join your side. So the point is, if we get to 5 to 15%, we already have a movement that can move mountains. We're talking about millions of people at that point. So then that's the real movement building opportunity. But go ahead, Shama.
Oh no, I was just agreeing with your point about how we need our focus to be on building mass movements to win enormous victories, and that's why, for example, Worker Strike Back, which you have supported, we appreciate your support for. We are calling for living wages, union jobs for all, free healthcare, a real fight against discrimination and oppression. And we feel that millions of people, like you were alluding to, millions of people will be mobilized and activated on these specific demands. And in fact, history shows that you can win victories even with a deeply hostile administration in power. For example, the history from the 1970s shows that the anti-Vietnam War movement succeeded in ending that war, and there were many victories that were won by the labor movement. Roe v. Wade was one, which unfortunately got dismantled when Biden was in the White House, by the way. And indigenous people won many victories at that time as well in the 1970s. And all of that was won. And most of all, Roe v. Wade was won and the Vietnam War was ended when Richard Nixon was in power, who was a deeply reactionary right-wing Republican. And so your point about the need for movements to be of paramount importance is extremely well taken. And at the same time, it is also linked with the question of the Democrats and Republicans, because as long as we don't have, as long as our movements don't have a political vehicle, a political organization that can represent our needs and that our movements can be tied to, where our own candidates are elected and present a serious opposition, a real opposition to the Democrats and Republicans, it always ends up stymieing movements. Whatever movements we build, if we don't have a political organ of our own for working people, then we end up getting stymied at every point. And in fact, we can make powerful shifts using an elected position. As you know, we had one elected position in Seattle, just a city council position, and yet we were able to win the highest minimum wage in the country. I mean, right now it's almost $20 an hour in Seattle. We were able to defeat Jeff Bezos and Amazon on the basis of using our position as a platform for social struggle, not as some sort of vanity project for any individual, you know? And so I think the question of movements and what we should do in November in relation to the election, I think are deeply connected. And we know that the biggest question facing the anti-war movement is how do we end this genocidal war? And as a next step for the movement, as you probably know, we've been calling for the protests to gather at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in mid-August. The corporate media has talked about the potential for them to be the biggest protests at a DNC since 1968. And certainly the Democrats are very scared. There's even talk of the Democrats canceling the in person event altogether and going completely online as a way to hide from the protest movement. Even if they did that, though, we don't think this should stop us in any way, and we should still build for the biggest possible protest in Chicago. Since the George Floyd protests, which ended in a defeat, there has been a question for some people about what is the way forward for protest movements and what is needed to win. We think protest movements need a clear strategy with clear steps forward that can broaden out the movement to the wider working class and not allow them to become narrow or isolated. That's why we also think that we should build for a nationwide day of action around the country during the DNC so that people who cannot travel to Chicago can also organize actions in multiple cities around the slogan of no Biden, no Trump, and the genocidal war on Gaza. We think that these actions should also include rallies, walkouts, and even strikes to tap into the crucial question of working class power and not just limited to whom you're voting for. So, what do you think about all this, Nick?
No, I love everything you said. So many great things said there. One thing I'm going to mention because you asked a rhetorical question about what the left should do, and I would say one thing that the left in the United States, I really hope learned a lesson because it was a very expensive lesson to learn. Because during the Bernie Sanders campaign, the working class in the United States probably spent somewhere around what 300 million, $400 million over the course of 6 years. What do we have to show for it? It's hard to talk about because it's something I had to learn because I quit my job. I worked on the Bernie campaign. We as a working class movement in this country spent $400 million, spent 6 years of labor organizing power on something that wasn't real. Imagine if we actually spent that on something that was real. Because despite what I said, I say to this day that I don't regret my time on the Bernie campaign. The reason why I don't regret my time on the Bernie campaign, because do you guys have any idea how many people I flipped during those few months? What's the only difference that I'm advocating for though? Why did I need an infrastructure of a campaign to do what I did? I didn't at all. So why can't we do the same thing we did with the Bernie campaign? Actually, seriously advocating for our needs, raising mass money for organizations who need it. That 400 million. Imagine a $400 million going to mutual aid organizations, Palestinian organizations in this situation, many other different activist organizations. You talking about serious movement building potential? Something that have we ever seen anything like that? It would take some time to build, but imagine we had the passion, the apparatus of the Bernie campaign without the fakeness. That's what I advocate for. That's why I advocate for mutual aid societies that will facilitate this. And when it comes to these protests, imagine we had $400 million that is able to go to bail funds. You had these university protests. There's a protest at Columbia where unfortunately some of the students made an ass of themselves because they asked the university to provide them food and water when they was occupying one of the buildings, and then the establishment had a field day. I don't know if you guys saw the story. The establishment had a field day because they like, oh, you guys occupying the building, but you guys expect us to feed you. And to be honest, it was kind of embarrassing for them to even ask for our establishment to do such a thing. We can avoid that if we had the mutual aid societies that we're talking about. Imagine we had the funds, the ability to coordinate movements like this. What it would take to build this in the United States, the most violent empire, the largest apparatus of the oligarchy we've ever seen, if you combine the United States and NATO and their allies. How do we accomplish this? Are questions we ask on RBN. That's what we do is so successful. That's why I think building bridges are so important. That's why I think the relationship that RBN have with Worker Strike Back is crucial. The same way the relationship that we have with Joe Stein, crucial. The relationship I have with all the people you see on our show, with Black Alliance for Peace, with many others, is so important because we all huddling together and trying to figure out how to do what no one ever in human history had to do. There have been a lot of successful revolutions, a lot of people who beat the odds in overthrowing the oligarchy. But what people ever had to deal with the empire, the life that we have to deal with, the international connection, the NATO treaty alliance, UK and their propagandists, Israelis, Zionists, the whole shebang. We are in a completely unique situation. The best thing we can do right now is organize. I think education is a giant part of this, which is why I take what I do extremely seriously. Why I think what you guys do is extremely important. Why I think every guest I have at RBN is doing is very important because you can't have revolution without education. Think about how where the left was just 10 years ago. Think about how where we was just 10 years ago, and look how far you guys have come in terms of your ideology. How far I have come, and I think the left in the United States is only going to get better. The unfortunate part is that we're going to be forced to. And about my last point, you guys know I'm a rambler because I study the scientific theory of revolution. And the reason why many socialists believe that socialism is inevitable because capitalists will never have their appetite sated. So the capitalists in our society have stole so much labor value. They have taken so much from the people, but they still want more. The military industrial complex still wants more. They're going to continue to steal from people. They're going to continue to pass bad policies because that's what capitalists do. Because the only ideology is profit driven. So when you understand the socialism of Marxism and revolution, you understand that it's inevitable that the clash antagonism will clash, would lead to revolution. That people will reach a boiling point, and people will get so upset that they will hit the street, and revolution will be forced upon us. What we try to do is we try to reduce the pain and suffering it will take to get there. And I think that's our goal because I think revolution is inevitable, but I don't want tens of thousands of people to die without health care before we get there. So that's why it's urgent on us to press as much action as possible, to organize and make our demands known, and never, ever, and it's what the left did for decades, my entire life, never, ever concede to the establishment, which is why we have a lot of respect, or been for what Kshama did, because Kshama didn't concede. You don't cede onto establishment on these issues. You hold a firm line, you build outside governments, and you don't take failure for an option. And only thing we can do is organize and build class consciousness, and change will come. I just don't want people to die before it happens. So I'm trying to speed it up. I think that's our goal. So hopefully that was a good answer.
No, certainly, if you think about climate change, then that's an existential question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the trajectory that you outlined of, being active in the Bernie Sanders campaigns and drawing like really hard lessons out of that is something that thousands of people can relate to. I've talked to so many people who are now, active socialist fighters who have a very similar story. And I think that also points back to like why we need to engage with these election campaigns in like an earnest way to identify those people who haven't yet, as Malcolm X kind of said, drawn those conclusions that we have drawn, right? To draw them along. And I mean, just as like a small aside, as a socialist, I think I would agree with your sort of pointing towards that like struggle is inevitable, but unfortunately, I don't think revolution is inevitable, or at least not succeeding or winning. And so drawing out these lessons is such a central part, for as a socialist to draw out so that when we go into those battles, we are armed and our working class comrades are armed with the ideas that are going to be necessary. And one of those, I think, that we learned while Kshama was in office is, while there is a really important role to be played of, if a union's on strike to organize, food deliveries and those kinds of things, but that we can't actually let the establishment off the hook in terms of like funding the things that working class people need, that we need to fight to tax big business and the rich. I mean, billionaires like Bezos, like Elon Musk, have hoarded hundreds of billions of dollars in wealth. And I mean, I don't think that they've come by that rightly. That's wealth that working class people have created. And when we are funding healthcare, when we are funding housing, that was something we learned through Kshama's office is the tax Amazon campaign that we were able to fight for thousands of units of affordable housing every year, which wouldn't be able to be done on the basis of kind of passing the hat in social housing. So
because all the wealth is consolidated at the top.
Yeah.
And I really agree with you, Emily. And I also see your point, Nick, about mutual aid. In our view, mutual aid shows the best of what human beings are. It shows that the vast majority, the billions of working class and poor people, are actually compassionate and empathetic and want to help one another, in complete contrast to what capitalism and the economics professors in school, they want you to believe that actually the best system and the system that we do have is a completely antisocial, cutthroat system where it's dog eat dog. And we actually don't believe that. And we see that over and over again. We saw how people in Haiti, in completely desperate circumstances, were helping each other during the environmental catastrophe, and even now when they're facing extreme violence and poverty. And so I really agree with your point about how that reflects the best that humanity can achieve, and actually that there is so much compassion in the world. However, I think Emily's point is also important, that ultimately mutual aid ends up getting limited because we have so little amongst ourselves and all the wealth is hoarded at the top. So I think those ideas of compassion and sharing then have to be paired with a fighting strategy to demand that the ruling class,
I want to add to that point, because those are fantastic points to be made. And mutual aid is extremely important because, as I was just explaining how revolution must happen, and Marxists must always push for revolution. But what about the single mother right now? And as Marxists and as socialists, we have an obligation for the material goods of people right now, even though revolution may not be possible for another 10, 15 years. Which is why that's one of the first reasons why mutual aid is so important, to address material conditions right now. And also, to be 100% honest, and I can give you guys anecdotal stories of stuff that happened this year to prove this, mutual aid is probably our best recruitment tool. There are people who are completely apolitical, who, when I had my diaper giveaway, when I had the barbecue in Kansas City, I had people ask me legitimately, like, they was so confused. Why are you doing this? I don't know you. Why are you giving me free diapers, bro? Like, people were so confused. I remember I was at the store buying diapers for people, and one lady literally was like, "Why are you doing this?" I'm like, and I literally explained to her, like, this is what we should be doing. We should be taking care of people. And then she decided to volunteer and organize with me. And I still have her phone number. I still have her on call to this day. And because she was inspired, she's not politically active at all. She was inspired when I told her straight up, when she was asking, I was like, because when you do mutual aid, you're not preaching. This is what Rome talks about. You're not preaching. You just do it for the kindness of your heart. And the questions will come. Because mutual aid without education is just charity. Because the point of mutual aid is education. So when you have these conversations with people, which I did, I said, we're doing this because this is how we believe society should be organized. I'm doing this because I believe our society left people behind. Right now, we're in a system where we're supposed to be individualistic. We should be taking care of each other. These are the three lines I said to countless people. And you want to know, every time I told this to people, their eyes lit up. There wasn't one person that was, I don't know about that. But imagine if you were talking to people trying to sell them on Trump. Imagine if you try to sell them on Biden. They wouldn't buy it. So when you engage in mutual aid and you show up to these people's community and show them that you are there for them, they would then join your movement because they'll see the sincereness of your actions, as you mentioned there. Now, in terms of how we gain power off this, once again, I just only have theories off of this, but I talk about how we build mutual aid societies, and when we get in the weeds on this, I talk about this on RBN. We even get to the point where we have our own governments, our own self-sustaining government that we are running amongst ourselves, that are hostile to our current government actions right now. So then imagine if you have a mutual aid society, you engage in mutual aid, you get all these people organized, and this is your question, how you translate this to power. Then we have these elections every 2 years. Who do these people vote for? Oh no, it'd be good if we have a candidate on the ballot. Not a big deal, but hey, man, if you support the actions we have, this is our political movement. This is how you sign up with this, and this is a very big part of how socialists and communists show to people and advocate that we are here with you guys. And another thing you mentioned as well, which is why it's important to build all of this, is the inevitability of revolution. I actually agree with what you said that revolution is not inevitable, uh, but people are survivors. People are very crafty, and the theory behind revolution being inevitable is the idea that as long as we put the work in, as long as we do what we are required of ourselves, people will be inspired. People will be driven to a point where they're desperate. Right now, it makes such a statement, but people are not desperate enough. But once people get so desperate and the organization is there, the revolution will happen. But we don't want things to get that bad in the meantime. So we must organize and we must educate people right now that things can be better so people don't get caught off guard. And I see it happens all the time in our community when people get caught off guard by the economic hardship that they go through, by police killings, by the reality of our society. And you can avoid all this stuff through education, through having what we are trying to build, an active working class movement. But there was a lot addressed there. I'll pass it back to you guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to dig into in terms of like the theory of what kind of society we can fight for and how we get there. And I don't want us to get too far away from our main point, but I think in addition to the points we were drawing out of, not letting the establishment off the hook and going after those hordes of wealth, and then also the like compassion of people in those mutual aid networks, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't also point sort of beyond that and talk about the fight for public ownership. I don't just think we should go after Jeff Bezos's bank account, but I think, Amazon, which is an infrastructure built by and maintained by working class people that can deliver medications and basic groceries and needs to people's front doors in 2 days. I don't want to boycott Amazon. I want to nationalize it. I want public ownership.
Take it into the public ownership by working people.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, you see that again and again with all kinds of other crucial services, like with the railroads, with these really horrific crashes, same with Boeing, these industries being run on, private profit rather than human need. But yeah, I want to kind of steer us back to, the question that we're talking about, right, of the elections themselves. And I think I want to get into actually the role that the labor movement has to play. I think we've talked a lot about activists and, left organizations. And, we are seeing that working class people are expressing their frustration and desperation through strike action that's happening right now. And they're also taking on political strikes. We've seen this really crucial vote of UAW members at UCLA to strike in solidarity with the students. It's really significant. Academic workers at 6 UCLA campuses are currently in their second week of striking against repression of student protesters and saying that they won't back down until all criminal and academic retaliation against students has been dropped. Of course, we need many more union resolutions like this one around the country against repression of protesters, but that's also not enough. It needs to go further, demanding an end to the U.S. funding for the war, an end to the war itself, and the occupation of Gaza. Workers Strike Back and On Strike have been calling for a one-day nationally coordinated strike and walkout in solidarity with the anti-war protest movement. To stop the war, we need major strike action that shuts down the profit machinery of the capitalists. Do you agree? And how do you think we can build the anti-war movement inside of the unions?
Yeah, and it's I live in a red state. I live in a right to work state, and there have been a lot of change over the last few years over the opinions of unions. Unions wasn't popular for a long time because how the capitalist class hijacked unions. You even still see it to this day with uh, union bosses. I'm blank on the guy's name, but the auto union guy endorsing Biden against the will of the rank and file. It's a big problem. But what we are seeing with the rank and file being activated and immobilized in a way we never seen before is a sign of good things. There are a lot of people who are anti-socialist in this country. They hate socialism. They can't define it, but they are all for collective bargaining, not understanding what they're engaging in. So we're seeing a rise in class consciousness. But I think like the biggest challenge we have is the union bosses and the labor aristocracy that is sheepdogging these otherwise radical workers into an establishment. Like many of the unions I see endorsing Jim Crow Joe. I've seen so many of these union heads saying that he has a great labor record despite being a strike breaker. That's a I see so many of them. It's actually shocks me, but I don't want to be negative here because it's a positive because the labor aristocracy is holding on by a thread. Like the legitimacy of these people is falling because the people are ready to engage in the social movement, the social action, the class warfare that we need. But the union bosses are in our way. The Frito Lay strike, I covered this
Mhm.
extensively because there's a factory in Kansas. What a lot of people didn't follow was the fallout of that, where you had all these people that were protesting and striking, and then the labor bosses undercut the ass of the workers, and now they back at square one all over again. So labor and union activism plays a giant role, and I think a lot of union activists are trying to revert. I think that there's a lot of unions are again back to their original uh, message of class struggle. But I think there's a lot of, I still think there's a lot of work to do with American unions, just to be honest. And we gotta make sure that we also fight for the people who are not unionized as well. And I feel like when I look at the ass of unions, a lot of people they forget the overall working class as a whole. So there's a lot of there's a lot of power. There are a lot of benefits that we can get by weaponizing labor against the establishment. But we just gotta make sure that people that are actively engaged in such struggle are not just giving their political power back to the two party duopoly, which I know you guys strongly advocate against. And the funny thing is, when I talk to union workers, which we had countless on our bin over the last few years, they are all radical post duopolists. They all hate Biden. They all hate Trump. Then you talk to the union leaders, and they endorsing one party or the other. You have them repeating. Pretty much, they sound like Democrats on a lot of issues, which I think is a problem that we have to overcome. But I do think overall, the rise of awareness it has been a good thing. It's a good trend in this country.
Yeah, I think you've really laid out sort of like a hopeful path forward of that millions of working class people who are in unions, aren't sort of falling for the endorsing of Biden. I do want to sort of balance out, I think, criticizing Sean Fain for endorsing Biden is absolutely correct. We did so in our interview with him at Labor Notes just a few weeks ago. But I think it is important to also point to that Sean Fain was the first sort of union leader who came out and spoke in favor of a ceasefire, and that I think that led to sort of more confidence of lots of union members coming out and pushing their union leadership to do so as well. And so, that he's playing kind of a complicated role, though we shouldn't refrain from criticizing him just because he is playing a positive role. I mean, we need, in fact, much, much more. And I think in regards to the positive role that he's playing, there's also this really historic effort that UAW is pushing for to unionize the South, and some wins and some losses that have been charted on that over the past few weeks. But nonetheless, just you pointed yourself to that the majority of workers don't have a union and that they desperately need one,
And there's huge openness to
yes,
unionizing
that people's
in the South. Yeah, which is
openness to it is
incredible.
just totally shifted, despite their governors saying that the union is an outside force. Them voting, in the thousands to say no, we want to be able to collectively bargain for higher wages and all those things.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point about how there is a huge desire for fight back all across America. And of course, as many of the points you laid out, Nick, some of this desire for fight back can get stymied if we don't have the correct political leadership. And so, as Emily was saying, it is important for us to point out the correct things that have been done by this or that elected leader in the union movement, but it's also our political and moral duty to call out anything that we think that is not in the interest of the working class. And so calling publicly for a ceasefire is absolutely the correct thing to do. But then to turn around and endorse Biden is absolutely not acceptable. And it's important for us to point that out. And in fact, you were talking about, Nick, you were talking about earlier how working class people as a whole ended up spending 300 400 million dollars probably on the Bernie campaigns. Similarly, the labor movement ends up spending tens of millions of dollars every presidential year, and that's not to mention all the other millions of dollars they spend on state races, city council races, on countless Democrats who may occasionally spout off pro-union rhetoric, but at the end of the day, end up representing the interests of the bosses for the most part. Not to mention, they are also going along with the war right now, and so I think that all of this really brings up the question of how do we organize the militant labor movement? How do we really bring back the militant American labor movement? And I think this is something that we have discussed many times on our show. What do you think about all of this in terms of what should rank and file workers be doing about all this?
Truth and clarity is everything, which is why once again, his Sean Fain, I think his name is, he can get his flowers where he get things right, but I think the misclarity on the working class is very harmful. For example, do you guys know that the chairman for the DNC convention that may or may not be canceled is a notorious strikebreaker? They worked with Lyft in an organization to break strikes and break up the formation of unions in New York. I covered this. I did a hotspot maybe a long time ago about this, where I covered this in detail. The point being, like, when you look at not only, like, obviously most people know about Biden and what he did on labor, but when you look at the organization of the Democratic Party, it's literally filled with strikebreakers. I did a expose over this organization, the DNC chair head, and they engaged in constant anti-striking, anti-labor activities. Now, why is this not something that is repeated by labor leaders everywhere they go in speeches they give everywhere they go? The Democratic Party is headed by strike breakers. They don't bring it up because they're doing their job and engaging in class war on behalf of the ruling class. Everywhere that they should be speaking, they should be talking about the strike breaker in the DNC. They should be talking about the strike breaking that's going on in their state. They don't. They mislead a lot of workers into thinking that the capitalists and the Democratic Party are their friends, which is why I answered your question the way I did. Truth is our friend. Like, we can't lie by omission. When you don't bring up the strike breakers in the Democratic Party, you are lying by omission, and we can't have that. So to answer your question, that's really all I have. We have to be honest with our work with the workers, but we are in an advantageous position, because when I talk to these people um, in the everyday, people worry so much about the 40% who vote for the duopoly. But when I talk to everyday people and they know I cover politics, people are like, oh, you cover politics? What's your politics? I'm like, you a Democrat? And I don't like Democrats or Republican. Then the door opens. People are more interested in that. So with that said, we are in an advantageous position when we explain to workers that both parties don't have their interests at heart. It immediately gives us credibility. Instead of, if you selling wolf sheep clothing, like, and this is what actually hurt unions, what Sean Fain did. 'Cause as I explained, I'm in the red state, right? So imagine you live in a conservative state, and a lot of these people may have politics that you don't agree with, but they're conservative. And then you see a union leader telling you that you should vote for the bankruptcy bill writing, crime bill writing person for president. Then that leaves workers who distrust the unions. Cause, like, you telling me that I should vote for Joe Biden? You telling me I should vote? So that increased the distrust. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I though the question was how we get people to be overall more class conscious. One thing we got to hammer third party. So the establishment, just to answer your question directly, the establishment keeps saying that Jill Stein don't have a chance. They keep saying, "Oh, why you guys keep wasting your vote on third parties? Third parties are a waste of time." Okay, if third parties are a waste of time, why do they spend so much time smearing them?
Right. It's like all the Southern bosses and Republicans who are spending millions of dollars trying to oppose the union, right? It's like if they're putting that much money into opposing it, then there's probably something there.
Yeah.
But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining us. I think your integrity and your position of being honest with the working class is so important. It's one that on strike we really advocate, and we're going to continue to be in touch with you over the coming months. I hope to see you at the DNC, and I don't know if you know this, but yeah, Workers
I have
Strike
plans
Back.
on. Are you guys going? Will you guys be there?
Yeah, we're
I
gonna
have
have a
plans on
rally.
going. Yeah, Kid from Harlem's meeting here in Chicago. I told him I'm going there. I already made plans. There are a lot of people I made plans with in Chicago, so
Okay, so
I
you
should be
will be
there.
there.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
making plans to go there as long as they don't cancel it. Right?
Well, I think even if they do choose to put it online, Workers Strike Back is still calling for a protest on the ground. And we're planning a rally in Chicago on Tuesday, August 20th at 6 p.m. And actually want to know if you would be willing
Bet.
to try to fit in your schedule. Would you be willing to speak there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. Oh definitely. Just give me the word. Give me
All
the word.
right.
Yeah. No. Anytime. I love Worker Strike Back. So anytime, I'm always down. I had a good time in Seattle. It was great meeting you guys. It was great. It's gonna be. I'm looking forward to being on the ground in action with you guys in Chicago. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be very important, especially because as I said, and I think you guys stress this as well. Electoral politics just gives us opportunities. You know what I mean? So like we're not Democrats. We don't care about the DNC convention, but it's an opportunity to raise awareness about the genocide. So give me the time, date. You guys know I'm always down, and I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Absolutely.
We'll be in touch.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
You too. If you watched On Strike before, you'll know that we provide an analysis from the point of view of working class people about the problems we face in our daily lives under capitalism. In every episode, On Strike also presents a strategy for working class movements to fight back. On Strike talks about why it's crucial that every fight for change emphasizes the need to build working class solidarity and is linked with organizing a powerful challenge to the political establishment and the capitalist system itself. This is something you won't find on mainstream media. That's why we need your support for On Strike. Subscribe to our On Strike channel on YouTube and like this video, and become a member of Workers Strike Back to help ensure we can continue to organize to rebuild a fighting labor movement. By becoming a Workers Strike Back member, you can also help this broadcast. We don't run any ads, we don't accept any corporate money, and we rely entirely on donations from working people. Go to workerstrikeback.org and click on Become a Member. Solidarity.